You get obsessed with things sometimes, I mean, very obsessed, and you really get into it.
Right.
And then you just sort of drop it one day and you move on and you get obsessed with something else. What is your latest obsession? What's the thing you're obsessed with these days?
K-pop. I like a song called I Am the Best.
Are the lyrics of the song about being the best?
Yeah, it's just like, I am the best. I am the best. I am the best.
This was my first exposure to the strange and addicting world of Korean pop music. Admittedly, I was a bit behind the times. For most of you living west of the IDL, you probably first encountered K-pop a few years earlier in 2012 with this guy. Gangnam Style took the world by storm. It was the most viewed video on YouTube for over 4 years by my calculation, which is just a token of K-pop's power and ability to absolutely steamroll over the globe like a Mongol horde. Since 2012, K-pop has only grown in popularity, trickling into every crevice of popular culture. Honestly, I never thought we'd be where we are now, with top Korean acts performing on American late-night television shows, but here we are. That, of course, doesn't mean that K-pop is universally beloved. Gangnam Style, in particular, is an interesting example because it highlights an important line of demarcation in the way K-pop is perceived. On the one hand, you have a massive amount of people who are absolutely obsessed over it. Beatles mania is child's play compared to the hysteria over K-pop boy bands like BTS. By now, I've spent enough time immersed in the K-pop world to know that it is almost cultish at times. And the other half of the world doesn't get this. It views K-pop as something of a joke, which is precisely why Gangnam Style went viral in the first place. It's funny, it's strange, it's absurd. Hey, come laugh at this video. And maybe you're one of those people. You can't understand why someone would enjoy this unironically. The Conan moment of 2016 was and is indicative of a broader cultural confusion. Why do people like this music?
What is it about? Is it the videos? Is it the music? Is it the whole thing combined?
It's kind of all of it. It's like the combination. I don't know what it is. I don't even know how to describe it. It's also addictive.
If you are a Westerner and you like K-pop, you are expected to explain yourself, especially if you're a straight white man, believe me. The problem with this is that it's difficult to explain why you like what you like. You just do. Reason is demanded for something irrational, so you begin to feel your way through a dark room trying to construct a verbal picture of an unseeable reality. Immediately you stub your toe on a dissonance. Two incongruent frequencies collided in your cranium. I like K-pop, but I have every reason not to. K-pop nourishes my soul, but it's not supposed to. Why do I like this music when I can't even understand the words? And what's up with the dudes wearing makeup? As I personally thought through these questions, I started listing in the direction of an answer. It occurred to me that you don't need to understand the words to enjoy it. In fact, there's another kind of music I love and listen to, even though I don't understand the words, and even though it often doesn't have words at all, because its meaning transcends verbal language. Its language was the very turning of the cosmic spheres. And you know what? It was made in a time when men wore makeup. The answer, which had begun to materialize slowly, suddenly crystallized all at once and hit me like a ton of bricks. Mozart. Mozart is the reason why I love K-pop. Obviously, if any of this is going to make sense, I have to begin by explaining my love for Mozart's music. Or at least, that's what I thought at first. But after hours of trying to explain the majesty of Mozart's music and why I love it, I eventually gave up. I cannot put into words the beauty of Mozart's music or explain what Mozart has meant to me over the course of my life. This has been part of the whole experience of Mozart's music. I can vividly remember the first time I heard the 40th Symphony. It was like something in my mind broke, fracturing in order to let in something that was beyond all my comprehension. In Mozart's music, I have found experiences beyond articulation, truth beyond words, a reality beyond rationality, an entire world. Dr. Robert Greenberg helped me to think about it this way. Mozart, even at his most dramatic and tragic, created in his music an alternative reality, a better world, an idealized place filled with hope and expectation. It's a place quite unique, a musical Eden, really. Mozart's music is a world, and it became my world. But How can I hope to describe that musical Eden in words? It's impossible, which is one reason why I put off making this video for so long. I can't hope to fully explain what I'm going to argue for, but I'm going to try anyway because it's so important to me. I'm going to make the audacious claim that I like K-pop because K-pop is like Mozart's music. K-pop nourishes my soul because Mozart nourishes my soul. K-pop wears Mozart like a perfume, and that scent is life to me. Think of it this way. You remember how in the film Vertigo, Jimmy Stewart falls in love with a woman, and then that woman ends up dying, and then he stumbles across another woman who is not as amazing as the first woman, but kind of reminds him of the first woman, and so he falls in love with her. He is drawn to what he sees as the inferior because she reminds him of the first superior love. That's kind of what it's like for me. In K-pop, I find something that reminds me of Mozart, even though it falls far short of the maestro himself. Now that isn't to say that K-pop only reflects Mozart's music. While for me personally, it is my umbilical-like connection to Mozart in particular that draws me to K-pop, K-pop reflects the style and spirit of classical music as a whole, which also really fascinates me. And this is an important point because we should be clear, I'm not just saying this is all in my head. Korean pop music is actually objectively influenced by classical music, and this is why, objectively speaking, I am fascinated by it and I enjoy it even more than a lot of Western genres of music. And in fact, I want to argue that Korean pop music is influenced by classical music more than any other genre of music being made today. And to be honest, I want to make this point if for no other reason than to stick it to the snobs who look down on K-pop as vapid and shallow. It may be vapid, to be sure, but two things can be true at once, and it's equally possible for K-pop to be truly vapid while also being the one popular forum today where classical music, the greatest music ever made, is kept alive in spirit and style. The easiest way for me to demonstrate this is with the myriad of K-pop songs which directly sample famous pieces of music by classical composers. What better place for me to start than with BTS, the biggest boy band not just in Korea but in the whole dang world. They opened their music video for Blood, Sweat and Tears with the Kyrie from Bach's B minor Mass. On top of that, a narratival break in the video graces us with Buxtehude's Passacaglia in D minor. But that's not really part of the song, you might object. It's just artsy music video stuff thrown in to make it seem deep. And to that I respond, yeah, well, at least BTS wants to seem deep. I don't see Cardi B even attempting a veneer of culture, sophistication, or an appreciation for art. But if you want songs with classical music in them, then buckle up because I got plenty for you. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata sets the stage for Fantasy by VIXX, influencing the overall musical vibe of the song. Mozart's 25th Symphony and Rondo Alla Turka are the backbone of ToppDogg by ToppDogg, framing and supporting the song from beginning to end like flying buttresses. These are very surface-level examples where classical music sits on top of a song without actually becoming part of it like oil sitting on top of water. But often classical music dissolves into a song like salt and they become one, a single aqueous solution. For example, Beethoven's Elise dissolves into Hands Up by Cherry Bullet and bends the chorus melody around it without asserting itself. And if you were not familiar with classical music, you probably would not know that the chorus melody of Good Night by Dreamcatcher is actually Handel's Passacaglia in G minor. Although, you might pick up on the fact that Do You Want Some Tea by Hello Venus is actually Pachelbel's all too ubiquitous Canon in D. Now this kind of nod to classical music is nothing new in pop music. And sure, you can find similar experiments in modern Western pop too. But the fact remains that classical music simply is not as pervasive in Western pop as it is in Korean pop. Despite having a reputation for shallowness and vapidity, there's a respect in K-pop for sophisticated classical composition and a recognition of true musical genius. I don't think it's controversial to say that classical music is welcomed and celebrated in Asian cultures in a way that it simply is not in the West. As strange a claim as that may seem, there is good reason for it. According to this article from the Southeast Review of Asian Studies, Korea in particular was introduced to classical music when Christian missionaries from the West came to Korea in the latter part of the 19th century and established schools that would eventually become the backbone of the Korean education system. Western classical music was a core element of education at these schools, and because of this, classical music was regarded as desirable because it became associated with cultural sophistication and prestige due to its Western origins and its affiliation with formal educational institutions from the beginning of its presence in Korea. Recognizing the connection between classical music and a potential for achieving a higher social status, Koreans started sending their children to music lessons in droves, and music training is now a ubiquitous part of the present-day South Korean cultural landscape. In fact, classical music has become integrated into the lives of Koreans to such an extent that in the everyday Korean language, the word for music is equated to classical music, not popular or traditional music. So classical music is pervasive in Korea, a fact which is corroborated by this article I found from Slate. My intuition is that classical music is so embedded in the creative DNA of both Korean artists and consumers that it bubbles up into Korean pop music, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally, sometimes explicitly and on the surface as I showed before, but often more subliminally. And here is where I make my most audacious claim, the one that is most difficult for me to prove, but that's not going to stop me from trying anyway. I believe that K-pop emulates, in places, the musical style of Mozart. For a long time, this was just a gut-level intuition, something I felt but couldn't explain, and could never hope to prove. But it was Cherry Bullet's Hands Up that gave me hope. It was a breakthrough moment for me because it was the first to really confirm my gut-level intuition with direct evidence. The connection is right there for everyone to see. Beethoven's Für Elise is clearly referenced, and the song goes on to use it and its classical melodic structures in a way that I think is pretty clearly recognizable. The rest of K-pop, however, is not so accommodating. It requires an ear trained by hours of classical listening and a mind that is open enough not just to the popular music of the masses, but to a kind of music that may cut against our sensibilities, values, and self-perceptions. I am talking, of course, among other things, about the practice called aegyo, which in Korean culture is essentially a way of flirting by being really cutesy, speaking fast, and repeating phrases and words and even sounds quickly. It's basically baby talk, the way moms talk to their newborn babies. But in Korea, you'll find grown adults talking to each other in this way, sometimes men, but usually women, trying to flirt with or get something from men. And of course, aegyo found its way into Korean pop music, although I've also heard that K-pop is what popularized it culturally in the first place. Frankly, I'll be honest with you, I don't know why it's a thing, and I don't know why people like it, and like most Westerners, my guards go up against it because I'm not into it. But here's the kicker. When aegyo is musicalized like this, in the process of being set to music, this starts to take on the stylistic trappings of something akin to, of all things, classical opera. Yes, I said classical opera. The kind in which rapid speaking and vocal repetition is also a key stylistic feature. Exhibit number 1, Mozart's Don Giovanni, Act 1, Scene 1. Pay attention to how Leporello repeats certain words and quickens the pace of his singing. Another favorite of mine is from Mozart's Abduction from the Harem. This time pay attention not only to how the words repeat, in this case the German Schnirren zu, but also how the musical patterns repeat and mimic each other with a tight symmetry.
Ah, wie wird mich triumphieren, wenn sie euch zum Richtplatz führen, und die Hälse schnüren zu, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu, und die Hälse schnüren zu, schnüren zu.
Here, the singing actually reflects the style of music that Mozart's music took, not just in opera, but through most all of his genres of composition. Donald Tovey argued that Mozart's whole musical language is, and remains throughout, the language of comic opera. And for my ear, that means the vocal parts of K-pop end up reflecting not just Mozart's opera by itself, but Mozart's style of musical composition as a whole. Listening to a song like Bada Bam by Oh My Girl, most people are going to hear a song for children because it is a song for children. Just listen. But when I listen to it, I also hear this. And this. And this. And while it's easy to immediately dismiss the repetition of sounds as ridiculous and childish, such repetition does often play a significant role in opera. It can be used for comic relief or even as character development. Here it's a part of Papageno's character, but ultimately it highlights the human voice as an actual instrument, even if K-pop doesn't necessarily take it that far. Another breakthrough moment came for me when I learned about something called patter-style aria. Again, it's a stylistic feature of opera where words are set quickly and syllabically, each syllable corresponding to a single note. And you've probably heard this one before. Compare this to Happiness by Red Velvet. Technically, that's supposed to be rap, I think. But unlike conventional rap, the syllabic notes are more melodic. Conventional rap sounds more like this. But in girl groups, you'll often find rap that sounds like this. But you know, to me, this is not really rap. This is patter aria. Just compare the pitter-patter vocals to La Vendetta from Mozart's Marriage of Figaro.
Se tutto il codice dove si volgere, se tutto l'indice dove si leggere, con un equivoco, con un sinonimo, qualche garbuglio si troverà. Se tutto il codice dove si volgere, se tutto l'indice dove si leggere, con un equivoco, con un sinonimo, qualche garbuglio si troverà. Qualche garbuglio si troverà, si troverà.
So here's the gravy. By taking rap and fusing it with aegyo, molding it with the inherent rhythms of the Korean language and way of speaking, Korean pop vocals often end up achieving the melodic contour of aria. Yes, to me, K-pop girl groups have more in common with classical music than with Western pop. Sue me, mock me, leave angry comments. I don't care, because it's true, and I've got more reasons to prove it. The classical period was the first time when the power of operatic ensembles was really recognized. For the first time, multiple singers sang different melodies at once, or sang at each other. And since there are multiple singers in K-pop groups, there's potential for this kind of dynamic ensemble, a layering of separate melodies. I Got a Boy by Girls' Generation, one of the boldest pop songs in decades, not only combines multiple genres, but defies traditional song structure, bringing the two parts together at the end of the song to create a single dazzling polyphony. This incidentally reminds me of my all-time favorite band, the Beatles, and what they did in I Got a Feeling. They basically smashed together two separate songs, having Paul and John sing them over each other at the same time, and it's pretty amazing. It's something I wish more bands in general would do. Admittedly, it's difficult since most conventional bands focus on having a single lead singer, but in boy bands and girl groups, all the members sing, so they are able to tap into that operatic potential, as well as the multivocular dynamic of classical concertos and chamber music like string quartets. Just listen to how the first violin banters back and forth with the cello in Beethoven's String Quartet No. 6. This kind of banter is totally possible in K-pop groups. And while no one out there is really exploiting the compositional potential of the group dynamic, unfortunately, the most experimental of all groups must surely be Red Velvet, which is the group that really opened my eyes to the symphonic potential of K-pop. In my opinion, Red Velvet has gone farther than most in creating a layered atmosphere in their music, and on occasion they're not afraid to overlay contrasting melodic riffs. Listen to how Joy tops off Sylvie's lines with these flutters which are then layered into the background of Irene and Yeri's vocals. Now compare this to Mozart's Divertimento in B-flat Kerschel 137 Movement 1 with its fluttering background. Or compare it to the way the violin tops off the cello in String Quartet 23 in F, Kerschel 590. The similarity is unmistakable. But then again, maybe it's all in my head. Maybe K-pop doesn't really mimic Mozart's music at all. Maybe I just love Mozart so much that I'm susceptible to hearing him where he isn't. Maybe it's just a matter of expectation molding perception. Maybe I am just like Jimmy Stewart in Vertigo, trying psychotically to turn Judy into Madeline, trying to recreate K-pop in Mozart's image. But even if I am wrong about the compositional style of K-pop, I'm still convinced that there is that in K-pop which embodies the ethos of Mozart, an ethos which is by and large not found in any modern music outside of K-pop. Mozart's music is bouncy, sprightly, coy, and mischievous. It hops and it skips, it teases you and prods you with its fingers. Mozart composed mostly in major keys, which means his music overwhelmingly sounds happy, positive, uplifting, serene. Because of this, Mozart has shockingly been called shallow. Lacking the intellectual profundity of Bach and the emotional profundity of Beethoven and the Romantics with their grief, tragedy, agony, and heroic defiance, Mozart seems glib and naive, as if he is ignoring the human experience. But this is not only to misunderstand Mozart, but to misunderstand the nature of reality as Mozart saw it. Donald Tovey reminds us again that in order to understand Mozart, we have to rid ourselves of the pretension that tragic issues are intrinsically greater than any other, greater even than comedy or joviality. Yet this is precisely our temptation, right? This is our disease. We think that tragedy is greater and more important than comedy. Modern Western pop is melodramatic, angsty, moody, aggressive, alpha, pathological. It values tragedy, conflict, dominance, and sexual exploitation. It preaches, it threatens, and complains. It gloats and aggrandizes the self. It says, "Screw you, I am the most important. I must be taken seriously." For Western pop, drama is higher than comedy, but Mozart could not disagree with this approach more. For Mozart, it is comedy that is highest. Comedy, the happy ending out of the foolishness of man. This is Mozart's musical language. Mozart, through his music, is telling us that there is a happy ending, that light is the real thing. Joviality is the heartbeat of existence, and creation is fundamentally praise. The goal of life is therefore to praise rather than be praised. We may disagree with this take on the world, but we cannot call Mozart shallow, not when he has argued his assertion with the music that defies all attempts to comprehend it and which, out of any other artistic corpus, approaches nearest perfection. In fact, Karl Barth goes so far as to assert that Mozart heard the harmony of creation, to which the shadow also belongs, but in which the shadow is not darkness. Deficiency is not defeat. Sadness cannot become despair. Trouble cannot degenerate into tragedy, and infinite melancholy is not ultimately forced to claim undisputed sway. Thus, the cheerfulness in the harmony is not without its limits, but the light shines all the more brightly because it breaks forth from the shadow. Mozart causes us to hear that even on the latter side, and therefore in its totality, creation praises its master and is therefore perfect. So Mozart's music is indomitably happy. It's cheerful music, it's glad music, playful music, fundamentally celebratory. And the only place I find music like that today is K-pop. Sure, you can find it here and there in the West, and I'm thankful for those artists and songs that are making playful, fun music, but unfortunately they amount to little more than blips on a radar. Whereas in K-pop, there is a steady, unceasing stream of playful, frivolous music. Having fun is one of the norms, not an exception, in K-pop. Unfortunately, as K-pop does become more and more westernized, attempting to appeal to Western markets, that stream of playfulness has begun to dry up, if ever so slightly. Whatever the future may hold, for the time being, the spirit of musical comedy lives on in Korea. So let's try and draw everything together. Is K-pop vapid, frivolous, innocent, and anti-intellectual? Maybe. All such criticisms have been applied to Mozart and his music, but they are on further investigation, not the whole story. Someone once said of Mozart that there was absolutely no sign of unusual power of intellect and almost no trace of intellectual culture, nor of any scholarly or other higher interest. Just like K-pop. And just like K-pop, it seems Mozart was a genius without pretension, an intellectual giant who somersaulted his way through life. He could not be an elitist, nor could he buy the lie of dignified solemnity. Not even the reality of death could quench his joviality. Mozart may be the only man whom the thought of death has actually made happy. Oh, and by the way, at the end of Vertigo, funny enough, Madeline and Judy turn out to be the same person. I'll let you chew on that one for a while. Anyway, thanks for watching. If any of you out there are fans of Mozart or K-pop, then let me know in the comments. I don't have any friends who really like either Mozart or K-pop, so I don't have anyone to talk about it with. And if you want some more esoteric content in your life, then by all means subscribe to the channel, because I have plenty of ideas coming down the pike. Till then, see you around.